So I'd like to start by acknowledging the land that I'm linking in from today, Quandamooka country, in the beautiful waters, lands and skies of Moreton Bay, and the lands of all of you who are joining in today. And I acknowledge that those lands have never been seceded. I pay my respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the custodian of their cultural, spiritual and educational knowledges and practices that they pass on to future generations. Today, we're opening up our Reconciliation Industry Network Group, or RING, to schools and early learning services. For those who've joined us for the first time today, I am the Regional Engagement Program Coordinator for Reconciliation Queensland. We're a state body for reconciliation here in Queensland that partnered with Reconciliation Australia's Narragansett Regional Engagement Program in 2019 to support all schools and early learning services in Queensland to foster a higher level of knowledge and pride in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories, cultures and contributions. I also facilitate the RING group, which is made up of leaders in the education sector. We meet on a regular basis to share ideas on progressing reconciliation across Queensland in the education sector. Here at Reconciliation Queensland, we are really proud to recommend that schools and early learning services engage with the Narragansett program when they're planning their reconciliation action plans and developing reconciliation experiences and learning. Services can engage with a large number of reconciliation resources available on their platform. And I'm always very happy to talk to anyone about the program and its resources. And if you need further information, more local information, I'm always happy to talk to you. I'm just going to share this video.
The lands on which we live and learn hold many stories. Some new, some old, some yet to be heard, some yet to be told. Narragansett, named after the Ngunnawal word, meaning alive, well-being, coming together and peace, is a program designed by educators for educators and everyone in the community. Schools and early learning services can get involved by embracing our land's deep history and fostering knowledge and pride in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, cultures and contributions. Reconciliation action plans can be developed through the Narragansett online platform to guide educational institutions to make commitments to reconciliation in the classroom, around the school or service, and with the community. Professional learning and curriculum resources are on hand to support educational communities build relationships, strengthen respect, and create opportunities. Whether you're a principal, teacher, parent, student, or community member, your journey is important, and Narragansett is here to guide you every step of the way. Reconciliation Australia invites you to join the Narragansett community and be a part of the national movement towards reconciliation. Together, through education, we're shaping Australia's next chapter.
So the word Narragansett reminds us that reconciliation is something that needs to be kept alive. It needs to be actively worked on every day and embedded in our practice on a daily basis. And through this work, it really gives a really important sense of well-being and coming together and peace that can be generated in the relationship between the wider Australian community and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. The Narragansett team tell us that there's 2,349 schools and early learning services who've registered to develop a RAP in Queensland. There's 502 schools. That's approximately a quarter of the schools, and 1,847 early learning services. And that's more than half of those. So the early learning services are doing really well in this space, and we congratulate them. As well as the schools, I know that that's increased a lot in the last year. So well done to everyone. Now it's time to introduce the lovely Phyllis Marsh, who works as a Learning Innovator in Indigenous Perspectives at West Moreton Anglican College, who promotes authentic learning through the wisdom of her First Nations voice.
Thank you. Guramba Bigi, Gawambili, Wanya. So hello everyone and welcome to something I hope is informative. I'm still a buzz to think that people think that I have something to say that's important, but I know that we've been working hard at Westmac to make a difference in how we approach. So without further ado, I'll get into it. But before I do, I'd just like to do an acknowledgement. I acknowledge the First Nation custodians of the land we are gathered on. I show respect and honour the diverse languages, laws, customs, cultures and traditions. I pay tribute to the elders that have since time immemorial have always shown and continue to display profound wisdom in their leadership. They live their wisdom and we all benefit from this knowledge. I acknowledge the ancestors in their way of teaching to learn, which benefits all. First Nations people are ancient teachers. Their way of thinking is reflective in their practices. They care for, connect to, and show wisdom of country. And I thank the ancestors for their teaching in the foundation of true leadership, that it begins when we truly serve something greater than ourselves. And I acknowledge the great spirit God that we look to him for guidance in this place as we take our steps slowly, gently, with honour and respect. Yindamara. So without further ado, I'll just jump straight into it. So I've joined West Moreton Anglican College I'm fast approaching 4 years. So in March, it'll be 4 years. When I joined West Moreton Anglican College, I came from a position of an RTO trainer as a national manager. So I had a lot of skills that I could bring to the role. And the role that I responded to was as a liaison officer. In my interview, I had the opportunity to speak about a vision that we could bring to this community if we were brave enough to do so. And they said yes, which I was very thankful for. And thus began Learning Innovating and in Indigenous Perspectives. So effectively closing a gap in knowledge from the wider community to build their awareness. And thus was born Westmac Indigenous Education. Here you'll see is the symbol that we designed to demonstrate how we walk and learn in that journey. So I've used two symbols for people. You'll see in the center, the U shapes. The U shape of the smaller person is the child to the U shape of the teacher. And behind the teacher are 3 rows of dots. And those dots represent the 3 sub-schools that we have here at West Moreton Anglican College. And if you count the dots, there are 8 areas of learning. We also represent our 3 values, which are faith, service, and knowledge. So it's a very simple design to embrace how we walk in the journey of embedding Indigenous perspectives. I had to find a vision, and I fell in love with a quote originally done by John Adams, and I've enhanced it to change it so that it puts in our vision for what we wanted here at Westmac. And the quote is, before any great things are accomplished, a memorable change must be made in the system of education to raise our knowledge in the ancient wisdom that exists in this country. And the Yagara word for learn, Yablim Bianya, which led into a cause. So it was all very well to have a vision, But when you're leading people in a social change, a vision lets them know this is what we're going to do. And the cause is, so how are you going to jump on board with me? So I took that directly from our own Indigenous education policy here at West Moreton. And that was West Moreton Anglican College embraces the philosophy that by sharing Indigenous beliefs and the willingness to learn from Indigenous experiences, we will help to enhance the education of all students in the college. So now I've got the vision, I've got the cause. I needed to create the purpose, something that everyone could jump on board with, something that they could easily connect with at the very end. And this was a combination of my vision and the cause that we were here to do. And like any great business, when you're trying to create social change, your purpose has to align with both the vision and the cause. So quite simply, it became raise our knowledge to enhance the education. Taking lines from my vision to the cause, what we're here to do, what we're about. Very simple. So it's very, 4 years in the place, and now I hear people easily roll that off their tongues. You know, when I sit down to work with someone, the very first thing we said, look, what's the purpose? We're here to raise knowledge and enhance the education. How do we raise the knowledge, and what does enhancing look like? When I finished doing all of that, I had to sit down then to make it meaningful, to make it authentic, to show true outcome. And before I reveal the First Nation education priorities that West Moreton Anglican College designed, I believe if every school in this nation was to adopt these priorities, it doesn't have to be in the same order, but we just have to have all of the priorities. It will make the biggest social change that we will see in our communities. It will rise and raise our awareness and help people embrace these education priorities with true impact. So, bearing in mind what I was here to do, raising the knowledge to enhance education, I was here to raise the level of cultural understanding. If we don't raise that level of cultural understanding, and I mean that takes in what I refer to as the cultural series, awareness and capability, competency, and intelligence, we are not going to create a deep impact. We're not going to create or initiate change to anybody's understanding. And what we will end up doing is keep continually going around on that cycle of this is what we want to do, but we don't know how to do it, which is what I was faced with when I first arrived. And what that told me when I hear that is that let's just take some time to raise your level here of starting with awareness and capability. And then we move into competency. And then, and this is the big one for me, cultural intelligence, raising that CQ. Research has shown that CQ is going to be one of those most significant and sought after skills with any change maker, any leader. We have to have that cultural intelligence because we are global citizens today. How we do that at Westmat is I created a 4 series and a professional learning development program. So that's something that I created into the context specifically designed for West Moreton Anglican College. But if any school seeks to take on that journey of raising the level of cultural understanding, then they can either deliver their own development program or get somebody to come in and do that for them. The next one was to improve curriculum uptake of Indigenous perspectives. So what that meant was I needed to sit down and I talked with the executive leadership team, the leaders of learning, the heads of school, and we looked at and the curriculum directors, and we looked at where we were seeing Indigenous perspectives hitting into our curriculum. Where does it first begin in the curriculum to where does it end? So where we first saw it start to appear was when the idea in grade 4, when they started to talk about colonisation. So we've now embedded it down into our kindy program and our foundation levels, prep, year 1, 2s and 3s. And we are working to scaffold that. So how does what they learn in year 3 then help them as they continue the journey in year 4 and 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and so on. The third is strengthen. Strengthen social emotional well-being of First Nation students. So I've seen and been a part of a lot of professional developments where they talk about the mental literacy, a mental health program. This is something that is either a hand or an arrow or another avenue that needs to be addressed prior to any of those core mental health programs. And here's why. If our First Nation students are being called to identify, how we say tick the box within their enrolment programs, they also need to know how they're going to be cared for, how safe they're going to be, how culturally safe. If you have one student who identifies in a whole cohort or year level of students, and then we're going to embed Indigenous perspectives, how are the staff culturally competent, culturally aware and capable, and have that cultural intelligence to assist that First Nation student and also to assist every other child in that class. So we're talking about, say, 27 students, right? And 26 of them are non-Indigenous, and you have one student who is Indigenous, and you do a novel. Now, we have a lot of First Nation authors coming out and writing wonderful novels, and we're encouraging through that competency and capability that certainly with that West Moreton, that we're using authentic voices. And if we don't use if we don't have the capability in our staff to help our First Nation students feel pride in who they are, then we're going to lose them. And the one thing that I feel is more sad than anything in this day and age, and that should cease to occur, is that we're seeing First Nation students disappear in our classrooms, shrink, and lose that pride in who they are. Have we had that happen at West Moreton? Yes. How have we designed to strengthen that social emotional well-being of First Nation students? I did away with homework classes because for me, that felt like a deficit approach. I wanted to create a strengthened approach. I wanted our First Nation students to feel as if they could lead in this space when it came time for their voices to be heard. So I created a leadership program called Ngari Payabam Karamba, which is the Yagara words for me, dream big. And we have currently 17 students who are participating in that program. And that program runs from our middle school students right through to our seniors in year 12. And the last one is engage. And this is the big one. Engage and practice reconciliation. I put in practice because we are part of the English language, and I know the Americans say practice covers everything, but in English and Australian, it's practice for how we do, and then practice in what are the policies or processes. So how do we engage and practice reconciliation? We are proudly part of Narragansett, and we have just submitted our RAP for approval and for looking at by Narragansett. We were ambitious. I know that it was designed around junior school, but we did it over our college, our 3 sub-schools. So we had 29 actions. We started that journey of RAP 1 year ago, and I have an amazing committee of people. And in that time, by the end of last year, having just started the journey at the beginning of last year, by the end of last year, we had completed 21 actions. So certainly one of those actions was to celebrate halfway, which is exactly what we did. And now we're ready to finish off the journey, looking to launch our RAP at the beginning of next year. We wanted to take it slow. It was never about a race. It was about raising that level of cultural understanding and how we were improving curriculum uptake and how we were strengthening our social and emotional well-being. Because if we can do all of those 3 things, then we engage correctly into how we're practicing reconciliation. And so thus is the formula of RISE. Like I said, if every school in this country applies this formula of RISE, they will certainly do that. So once I design that, where to from there? How do I make this happen? So I created what we call a Dandirri to come together approach. Dhandiri is the Yagara word for to come together. I'm using Yagara language because that's the country we are on here at West Moreton Anglican College. So we contextualize it to learning about language through using the language. And I'm sure you all know that. So Dandirri, to come together. And the approach is, we looked at Ngari, Milan, Gambili. So first of all, we start with ourselves. And then we look at how we work within the community, many, then how we work with the broader community, Gambili. And so the symbol there, which you can see, is designed as Ngari, which is the first one, and is the central focus, then to many, and then Gambili. Now, I only have a short time, so I'm only going to talk about the approach we took with Dhandiri is 4-way approach. And I'm only going to talk about the 2-way approach at the moment. Happy to come back and do the rest at a later date. But I'm going to talk about Dnd Curriculum and Dndiri Professional Learning. Dndiri Professional Learning is the R, how raising our cultural understanding, and Dndiri Curriculum is the improve. So I'm going to start with the professional learning first. The self, or Ngari, part of the symbol was cultural awareness and capability. So first we looked at what was the idea that we had about our understanding of cultural awareness and capability. We went deep into self. At times it was uncomfortable for the staff, and I really challenged them on that awareness and capability, which was good. It's what needs to happen when you're dealing with conscious bias and unconscious bias. When you're dealing with social change, it's not about let's do it at the level of what we see. Let's get authentic and go deep. That led us to cultural competency. One of the things that I find absolutely amazing and hard to comprehend is that as educators and teachers, we are part of one of the Australia's largest workforce. And yet, you know, and it's on us to educate and teach the next generation about our ancient culture. And yet we do not have a program that is built into the curriculum about cultural competency. And I know that that's changing. It's certainly changing through the work that's being done. But still, I was astounded when I first came in 4 years ago and could not see any program that as educators we could connect into. So which allowed me, I guess, to design one contextually for West Moreton Anglican College. And that cultural competency, again, was we went deep. And you need to go deep. You need to have someone who's going to challenge you and engage in conversations that will inevitably lead to change. So that cultural competency, we looked at our unconscious bias, the stereotypes, resources that we're using, and how all of this impacts on a generation or within our classrooms for our students. The last one was cultural intelligence. You know, how does this engage me with everyone? And so what I've done with this whole model is that it falls back into itself, and you'll see what I mean. So we had to come up with a framework, and I guess this is what we call our cultural framework. And we had to look at, now we all know the symbol of the iceberg, yeah? Above and below. So below is our qualities. What do we engage in? What do we value? What do we serve in the qualities? What do we adhere to that have impact and have results in the behaviors that are above the line, that are outwardly shown in how we work with our colleagues and how we educate with our students in our classrooms. So to help them along, what we talked about was what were those here we go. Sorry, to raise knowledge to enhance the education. So first of all, we looked at the qualities that we desired here at West Mac. The first being respect, utmost importance. Respect is something that is so profoundly part of First Nations culture, and it's also profoundly part of humanity, us as people today. Give respect to the people who are a part of your community. So we broke that down of what that would look like. We then have how adaptable are we? First Nation culture, certainly our First Nation cultures of the world have displayed that skill of adaptability. You cannot say as a nation that we have the honour and privilege of having in our country the oldest surviving continuous practicing culture without the fact that they had to at some stage display adaptability. And there are so many amazing stories that we can share. And the last one was grit. And grit is something that is also being displayed by First Nation people as a culture. You know, that grit, that determination, serving something bigger than ourselves, and that having that grit to ensure that our culture is still practiced today. So these were the qualities that we engaged in when we talked about our cultural framework. Qualities that we need to display when we are moving forward in cultural change. Our grit, adaptability, and respect. So what did those behaviours look like? We needed to have the behaviours, once we engaged in those qualities, of active listening, empathy, and effective engagement. And what I mean by why I said effective engagement, not just engagement, effective is how well am I building a relationship with somebody? How well are we communicating? How well are we engaging together to affect social change, to affect cultural change within our community? And that's why we settled on those words, effective engagement. All of that together is what we is part of that first two symbols. So you take Ngari, the first symbol, and you place it in the heart of the second symbol, cultural competency. You have at the what were below the your qualities, your grit, action, and respect, and the behaviours up top: active listening, empathy, effective engagement, resulting in a cultural framework or a cultural model called Garali. Garali, so that now we can, when we sit down together, we look at how we are practicing Garali, how we are practicing our framework. When I go and work with one of my colleagues, this is the cultural framework we follow: grit, grit, action, respect. Sorry, not action. Why did I put action? It was adaptability. I'm sorry, guys. Active listening, empathy, and effective engagement. That was our Garali. The three peers or models or pillars that I ask people to look at or reflect on is, and remind themselves, is self, is Ngari, and that's my awareness. others, Millen, what action am I taking? And together, what are we hoping to achieve? Ngabili, Dandirri. So that's our cultural awareness approach, awareness of self, of the action I'm taking, and how we are working together on that. Ultimately, and I just wanted to throw this in here, this leads us to the Danderi model. So you can see here now how the Yagara symbol folded back into the competency symbol, which then both of those symbols folded back into Ngambili symbol. The Ngari and the Millen symbol have replaced all the little white dots in the Ngambili symbol. And if everyone engages in that cultural framework that we designed here at West Moreton Anglican College, we will achieve Dhandiri. Does that make sense, everyone? I'm sure, I am hoping it does. Linda, can you give me a nod if that sounds okay? Yeah? Because you're the one I can see. Just nod.
Yeah, sounds
awesome.
Good.
Fantastic. So that was our professional learning. Moving into our Dndiri curriculum. Everything that we designed, or sorry, everything that I designed, I had to ensure that my colleagues and the executive leadership team and the students were going to have effective outcome. And to build that in for the Dndiri curriculum, I've designed a simple approach. So what I did was design themes. And you'll see here, we have what we, a poster I did up, which is what we learned from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives. We learned caring for country. And in caring for country, we recognize ancient and sustainable ways and learn best practice for our environment in caring for country. We engage in that way of thinking, which is way of knowing when we care for country. The second symbol is connecting to country. We engage with stories and movement that reveal how ancient culture survived through connecting to country. And that's the thinking of way of being. And then the last one being wisdom, learning different levels of practice and process to engage with the wisdom of country. And that's that way of thinking, a way of doing. So having designed this, I then was able to take this to the teaching staff. And what we did was we looked and streamed, or what I did was stream through the 8 areas of learning. So the first one was caring for country, and in that is science and geography. The next one is connection to country. So I put that English, the arts, HPE, and language. And then the third one was wisdom of country. I streamed through the areas of mathematics, HAS, and technologies. Each of those, so if we just go back to the statements, those statements, we then are able to pull out our learning outcomes when we look at how we care for country, connect to country, and wisdom. So in caring for country, and I have an example of this a little bit later, where we would do science, we pull out our learning outcomes directly from that statement. So this is a 3-step approach that I designed: innovate, stream, and learning. Innovate, what is the theme? So if it's science, it's caring for country. We stream it through that theme statement. So how are we going to, what were the learning outcomes of what we are going to learn from caring of country and way of knowing? And then we design the learning. So let me help you with a little organizational chart I did. Now, I'm not a teacher and I don't have the full language of what you would have learned, but in my most basic understanding, if you're looking at a content descriptor, this is the statistics and probability of data representation and interpretation. This was a unit, or the content descriptor for year 8 maths. And then we looked at the unit, so explore the practicalities and implications. so that unit. And then we look at, well, what were the general capabilities that we need to ensure that the students are taking away, and that we must embed into that their learning. So you have to, for this unit, look at literacy, critical and creative thinking, and numeracy. There were no cultural cross-curriculum elaborations in this particular unit. And then we design the lesson. And I know within senior and middle school, the unit or the content descriptor is part of a bigger unit. Whereas I know from my time in working with junior school, although it's part of a bigger theme, you may just address unit individually. Not everyone, I'm sure, does that practice, but that's my understanding of how we are doing things here at Westmac. How does it look when you embed those 3 steps? You remove the design process. It's still the same top 3 approaches, and you just embed the 3-step approach, which is, what is the theme? And what is that theme statement? And how do we design with that? And that's why I made it really easy. When you theme it through, you take it through the statement. I've prepared something so you can have a look at it. So this is a year 3 unit, and the learning area is science. The content descriptor was a change of state between solid and liquid, which can be caused by adding or removing heat. The unit is what you see there. The elaboration, this one had no elaboration in it. So the elaboration was investigating how changes of state and materials used by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, such as, I'm sorry, I can't read, can't see the end of it, but beeswax or resins are important for their use. The learning theme was caring for country. The thinking was a way of knowing. And the learning outcome, which I've put down the bottom so you can read it, and we just created the learning outcomes to be recognizing best practices and learning from the environment, and learning sustainable methods from First Nations perspectives. And you can see that that is taken from that statement of caring for country in recognizing ancient and sustainable ways and learn best practice. I designed something to make it extremely simple in when our educators or teachers were empowered to do this 3-step approach without me in the room. I'm one person in amongst a staff of about 140 teachers. The way I work is I work with them in their designing. I'll go in and deliver a class, I'll take a class, as well as developing the professional learning development, as well as helping strengthen our social emotional well-being of our First Nations students, as well as leading, co-chairing our reconciliation committee here at Westmac. So I'm a very busy lady. So I needed to make sure that our teachers were empowered to do this, and confident and competent and capable to do it by themselves. Our goal, our purpose, raise knowledge to enhance that education. We didn't want to lose our First Nations students. We didn't want them feeling as when we speak or when our teachers talk or teach about First Nation culture and histories, that it was not a continual deficit approach, that they are working to enhance the education of all students, as well as, if you will, calling on our First Nation students to participate in helping lead part of that class. There's, for me, nothing more powerful when you have people use their voice in a culturally safe environment. And that is the goal here at West Moreton Anglican College. We wanted it to be culturally safe for our staff, culturally safe for our students. And this roadmap, this framework, that formula, RISE, was an approach that we have put into practice and have been working with it for the last 3 years, and we have seen a magnificent change. We are really proud of this, and we know, as I said, that if every school employed this formula of RISE, they will see magnificent changes. It can't be a one-step approach. It, for us, was that approach of Dandirri. And why do we call it an approach and not have it as a program, or not have it as a separate pillar or strategic vision? And certainly I was asked if that was the best approach. And for me, that is not what First Nation culture is. When we talk about First Nation ancient culture, and we looked at that practice, it's an essence, it's a spirit, it's a connection, it's an engagement. And Dhandiri is an approach where it's an essence, it's a spirit that moves through everybody, Gambili. And that's why the model of that cultural framework sees it fold back into itself. Because if we don't have that approach, if I don't have that practice, then I'm going to be a lone person doing, pushing a rock uphill. And I needed everybody to be on board with the cause, so that everybody knew the purpose. And that's why here at West Moreton Anglican College, we treat it as an approach, so that it falls in our culture and the way we do things. We have a very specific Westmac culture called the Westmac Way, and we call that 3 ways of being. And that Dhandiri approach infuses into each of those ways of being. It infuses into our executive leadership team when they sit down to create a strategic vision. It infuses into our leaders of culture when they sit down to look at the social and emotional pastoral care of our students. It infuses into our teaching staff. So I wanted to use language and a design that wasn't separate to engaging something that they had to engage in, but it was something of a way of knowing and being and doing. Does that make sense? Linda, everybody? Yeah, because I've finished my presentation and I want to open it up to questions. And I really hope we have a lot of questions so we could either explore how you could do this in your school, or pick my brain while you have the opportunity to do so. So I will hand back over to Linda, and maybe we can get into a questioning opportunity. Linda?
Yes, just scrolling back here to look for questions. If anyone has a question right now, they can take themselves off mute and just ask directly, because we've got lots of comments. You know, the symbolism is beautiful and inspiring, and you know, a very insightful you know, presentation and way of doing things.
I'm First Nation. I have to build a story around everything and a symbol. I mean, I work very closely with our deputy principal, and that's the other thing, guys. If your school wants to get serious about affect change, you have to employ somebody who's the ability to do it and work very closely with an executive member.
Can they see me though? Because I don't want them to see me.
Does somebody have a question?
Has there been a lot of parent interaction in the program as well?
So this is the year that we are implementing and welcoming our parents. The parent interaction comes into through a reconciliation committee where we're getting parents on board, and as well as we're also running a campaign called 365 Every Day, and that's run out of our leadership students in Ngari. And we're opening that to the wider community and for parents to be involved. So we had to do a real education phase, if you will, with our parents. They had to get to know me, they had to get to hear me, and we've had wonderful feedback. You know, when I go into a classroom, the thing that I think about is what's going to be repeated at the dining room table that night. So I'm very selective in how I speak, especially when we speak about that traumatic period of colonization. Because these kids are going to take this back home. And I have had little ones come up to me and say, you know, Mrs. Marsh, I told my dad about what you said, and my dad says that that's not right. And he told them, and the little kid saying, well, I told him, no, we need to do better. And when I'm talking about a little child, I'm talking about a child in year 5. So they're learning in a way that's not, that we're not losing them to using traumatic language, but we're enhancing their wonder in ancient culture. And they love it. Like I was with the year 4s yesterday, and they were like, you know, yes, we were hoping you would come in. We couldn't wait to see you. So that's when you know you're doing well. And we've had no, and I can say this quite honestly, we've had no negative feedback from parents today.
That's
Anybody
amazing.
else?
Yeah, there was a comment here that from somebody who had asked about how they may be able to utilise the concepts with under 5s and the early years learning framework. Well, of course,
So with RISE, so is that the concept you're talking about, RISE? I'm going to assume it is, because that's the one thing that you can take away from today. Everything else is contextualized to West Moreton Anglican College. So, for example, if you were to do an approach where you want to name it something, I would encourage you to use the language on the country that you're in. And the language is there because First Nation culture is all about togetherness. So how you would do that in early years is I designed what I call a Westmac Eco Explorer program. And this is a little book where it helps students, they take it away and they fill it in. And it is bedded into this little program. Their ways of knowing, way of being, and way of doing. I work with our kindy teachers to help them engage or raise their knowledge. And I looked at ways that they could embed into their classrooms, you know, not just have a picture on the wall, but an actual experienced corner where they can go in and either play with natural products like gum nuts or leaves or wood, and then going out and having signs on the trees so that, you know, they could feel and have that sign which says, you know, this tree our First Nation people use as medicine. Certainly like the Melaleuca tree, which our kindy has trees in their garden of. And to raising that social emotional well-being of our little ones, you know, these kids, when you're in early years, they are so enthusiastic of their culture. So if they are practicing it at home and they're learning about it, is coming into their classroom where they need to see themselves in, they will share that with you. Every little child in early learning, you know, I go in and they just want to share a story. And of course, then, you know, that's helping you engage in reconciliation and how you're practicing it. You know, I'm working with that kindy to develop their own rap with their parents and staff and students. So I hope that answers the question.
I certainly see it as very doable in the early childhood sector.
Yeah.
you just have to adjust for developmental stage. That's all.
Yeah, and that's what, you know, I did. Like I can, you know, this Westmac Eco Explorer was designed for foundation, but I adjusted it to our kindy kids, you know, so helping them learn and wonder of the environment. So it wasn't so much as sit down, but it was going out and experiencing.
Yes.
Any other questions?
Yes, there was quite a few actually in the early learning comments about how to do that in the early learning sector, because we made it available to both schools and early learning
Yes.
services. Mm.
I hope that covered it. I mean, this is where innovation comes in, guys. But that's why you need to raise that knowledge, because once you start going down that pathway of learning about an ancient culture with wonder, you know, to then bring it over to our students, their minds, you know, I've not gone into any classroom where I felt it's a lost cause. So I've been in kindy to year 12s. So year 12, we started off with this term, a poem, an Indigenous First Nations play written by Wesley Enoch, and it was the Black Medea. Now that is full of symbolism. And I worked with them for a week in so all last week in pulling down the symbolism of that play. So I've not had the experience of going into a classroom where they're going, oh, you know, here we go, she's back. I have always had enthusiasm and wanting to learn, because you need to be very clear on the approach you're going to take. And I think, you know, the hard work and effort we put into this design has paid off with how our students engage. We have a nice uptake of non-Indigenous students wanting to be part of that campaign of 365 every day, because they see themselves in it.
Yes.
If that makes sense. So they have to see themselves in the journey.
I have a question, and it's a very familiar one, about a non-Indigenous person unsure about her, you know, the appropriateness of her teaching Indigenous culture to children.
So you can't, as a non-Indigenous person, you cannot teach it. You can teach about it. So if you're looking at a collaboration, or sorry, a elaboration, for example, how I used it in year 3, it's how you, what other resources have you engaged in? So there are lots of platforms out there. Yeah, what is the one they use here? Oh, I forget. But, you know, of teaching resources. But how hard are you also looking to find our First Nation teachers who have also set up their own teaching resources designed around that curriculum in helping you to embed First Nation culture? So if you're, for example, if you don't have a cultural educator in your school and it's just you, you're sitting with your team, find resources that help you teach about investigating how First Nation people use resin within their environment. So for this particular one, because I'm in the school, the teachers approached me and said, we can't find anything. So I've created a unit for them, and I'm going to send that off so that they can show how the changes, how they use resin how they use spinifex grass to collect resin to create their tools. We have a question from Sarah, is it? Hi. I know your name, Sarah, but I can't hear you. Do you want to put it in the chat? Sorry, Sarah.
Oh, is it working now?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Oh, yay. Okay. I have a question regarding your role in your school. So I guess it's just, how did it come about? What was the theory behind it, and how you utilized in your school? Like, I know you've said that you go into classrooms and do experiences with the students, but I'm just wondering, how did that all come about? So was there a particular percentage of First Nations people in your school that there had to be for you to then be employed, or?
Yeah, so West Moreton Anglican College wanted to be innovative in their approach. They had, and I guess it was a case of they knew what they were looking for, and that they had to wait for, shall we dare say, the right person to take the role and create it for what it needed to be. When I came in for the interview, the very first question I asked was, how many First Nation students are there? And if I'm a liaison officer, which is the default role of going in and sitting with the students to help them, how many students are a part of that learning enrichment or need educational support? Out of the, at that stage, 25 students, not one of them needed educational support.
Okay.
So it was a defunct role. So what I said we could do within the interview is, if we couldn't, you know, because my son goes to the school and he would have died with embarrassment. Now, that has direct impact on his social and emotional well-being. He wanted to be able to, and he needed to be able to be in a space that was culturally safe for him to learn, and as well as challenge. And if it was just somebody who responded to the role and said, okay, I'll be the liaison officer, it was not going to benefit our First Nation students. So why it changed was for that sole purpose of how it affected our First Nation students. I could see something greater that we could achieve. I'm just thankful that West Moreton Anglican College was brave and courageous to do that.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe you can stop screen sharing.
Okay.
So that I could notice whether people have their hand up.
There we go.
Have gallery view.
Phyllis, can I just pick up on a really important point that you just made about, and it was a couple of people asked this question in the chat box as well.
Yeah.
About if you have any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander students in your school, or if you don't, what does that mean for this work? So, the work of reconciliation and the purpose of having a reconciliation action plan, or having someone like Phyllis do this work in your school or service, is very much about the fact that it doesn't matter if you have Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander children at your school or service or not. This work is still a very big part of the work that we need to do as teachers and educators. And I just wanted to make that point because, Phyllis, you just picked up on that
yeah.
The Aboriginal kids in your school didn't actually need your support, and that, you know, that's because they're also amazing learners, just like any other Australian student. And
Yeah.
so the more important work is actually the work of reconciliation and getting all students and all children that are sitting in services and classrooms around the country to understand and value and respect Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures, histories, people. Yeah, so I just wanted to pick up on that point, Phyllis, because I think it's a really important one.
It is. And Julie, that's why I said with E being our most important one, reconciliation. Because I don't know if you all know this, but we got some fierce kids coming up the ranks. We only have to look at Grace Tame and fierce proud. You know, we look at the rise of First Nations business or non-for-profit, and you look at the age group of the young CEOs, the leaders, and we're looking at, you know, early 20s, and they want to make a difference. They want to make a change. And I guess I was just driven as well by the fact of, I just think it was totally ignorant if we do not educate all students for the benefit of First Nation knowledge, way of thinking, practices. And we've got to get it in our bones as a nation that we have the world's oldest surviving, practicing, continuous culture. That's something. That's something. And our First Nation people know that. Our First Nation students know that. They just need to know that where they are is safe to be who they are. And through that is a way of educating, because I know my own experiences in the schoolyard. It can be tough and it's cruel. And we call out racism, but it's such a generic approach. There is a different level of racism when it comes to being First Nation. It's, gone are the days where we don't feel empowered by our culture, by who we are or what we've bought, by the shame of stolen generation. What we now are seeing is people rising up saying enough's enough. This no longer can occur in our lifetime, and we're going to make a social change. And you've got some real go-getters out there. You only had to look at Clothing the Gap and what they did with freeing the flag, and they did. That flag is for everybody. So I'm really glad and proud to see that not only myself having allies within this space, when I delivered cultural awareness capability, I had an ally deliver that with me, because it was powerful to have a non-Indigenous person stand with me and help her colleagues see what allyship should look like. And then also my son has allies. When he took the campaign to his group of friends, we had his mates, and he's the only Indigenous person in his year level. There are only two. And he had his mates go, yeah, we'll do that, because they could, again, see themselves in it and they see the benefit. So we're going to see these kids moving out into society on fire. Anything else?
Yes, there's a question in here about whether schools need permission to use language.
Yes. Yes, and that's part of that reconciliation process, where you're going out and building relationships with that community. And I know that, some people struggle with what that looks like. I guess we were lucky at being an Anglican school at West Moreton Anglican College. 22 years ago, they had what they referred to as the Adopt a Elder scheme. And we have our elder still proudly leading us in that space. And that was Uncle Albert Holt in Brisbane. He was a community elder. And now I'm building relationships with our traditional custodians. So we have them come in and they deliver a language program, but I had to ask permission if I could also use that as part of the work we're doing at school. And I can guarantee you that they will be so proud that you are prepared to use their language in the main stream of your approach, which is how we've done it here. Dhandiri approach is for everyone. It's not just for First Nation people. Otherwise, it would be a very small group here at West Moreton Anglican College. But we have it's an approach that I know that our principal, Jeff McClay, and our deputy principal, Janelle Lazinski, who's my biggest champion, are very proud to see embedded into their school. and I know the Anglican Church, certainly of Southeast Queensland, they work very hard. And, they launched their RAP last year, and I'm all about connecting. That's part of my culture, connection. And so with that, what they have launched, we're able to bring that to our space as well. For example, they have artwork, and I put my hand up to have the artwork, reconciliation artwork, at our school for a term. And I was lucky enough that the bishop said, yes, you can have it for a term. So it's currently doing the journey through our college. It's sitting in senior school at the moment. And I'm developing a 2-lesson program built around that artwork, because in it is embedded the 7 steps. And there is a specific language, 7 lessons. And I think it's important that our students learn that, and that's built into the Anglican Church of Southeast Queensland's artwork. So I'm very proud to be able to deliver those lessons and have it go out to all classes within middle and senior.
Fantastic. Yes, there's a question also adding on to the language from Kira Sampson.
Yes.
I'd also like to know about using language and finding people in the community who can advise on the use of language. I do have a list of traditional owners from the Brisbane area and can also access that information.
Can we ask her what country she's based in? Because that's the first thing, you guys, there's a campaign of Know Your Country, and I'm an ambassador of that. And if you have to know your country, and that is part of your social responsibility. I work with the little kids. So in year 4 yesterday, for example, we looked at the map of Australia, and our national or our nation's title, or what we call our nation, is Australia. And then we use that language of nations, and we looked at that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander map. And we, those kids were like, that's all nations. So, you have to help them unpack what a nation is, and which is what we did. And then once we unpacked that, they were astounded. They were in wonder that we have this many nations in this country with different laws, different languages. I was telling them in the Northern Territory, students can speak up there in the Northern Territory up to 15, 16 languages. And that's just from their own nation. And they were like, wow, so, go to blow their minds, and their minds will be blown. But as a teacher, you have to, it's your social responsibility to know the country you're teaching on. And then if you can, learn about the clan or the family group that you're specifically with. So in this particular area, we are Gidabal clan. So I'm specifically working with those people, those First Nation custodians.
Right. Just scrolling through on further questions. Very positive comments from a lot of people, and about your work and how wonderful and well developed it is. Did you want to say something? I
was just going to say, when we look at First Nations people, that their way of knowing, being and doing, it is, if I can say anything very quickly about what I share, is that I work with people, students, my colleagues, that it is relational. Everything about First Nation culture and ancient culture is about the relationships that we build. That's first and foremost. And, that's reflected in creator spirits, the entities that are part of that, the relationship with, because the biggest concept that I struggled that I heard from people struggling at West Moreton Anglican was, how do we teach about connection? And the first thing I said was, connection is just about listening. So let's go out and talk to country. And so, I took, as part of professional development for the teachers as well as the students, when I have a chance, is take them out, stand them in front of a tree and ask them to tell me what's that tree telling us right now. So with the year 5s that I did yesterday, for example, we were in front of a banksia tree and we told the story of what was happening in that tree at this time of year, and what the tree was telling us. So is the tree telling us that it's okay to take from it at the moment? No. Why not? Because it has no pods or flowers. Well, and right now the little stems coming through are too green. So we don't have the permission yet to take from that tree. Also, that learning of connection to country, which gives us the idea that if we read from our skies and what's happening on country, we connect into the seasons, which can then tell us when we have to travel, whether it's to another part of a region or another nation because of ceremony. It's our country and our connection which tells us that. Or a messenger who brings the message stick. But it's how you build that wonder. And as teachers, you're doing that every day. You're building wonder in your students of how to learn maths, how to write stories, how to do science experiments, the geography. So once you understand this and remove that block, you will free up your mind to be able to embed into how to teach about First Nations culture. Some of the things you can't do, for example, and you should rely on First Nations people who are traditional, like I would not, and give that respect back to the tradition. So if we learned about cordage, for example, I wouldn't take the kids out and teach them how to do cordage. It's not my country. It's not the plants that I would use in my country. So this is where I would work with a First Nations person to come in and take that walk on country to design or create cordage. What I can do is take them out and tell them the story of that tree. But as a teacher, you can also do that. I hope that has answered some questions or doubts, put some doubts to Ben.
Yeah, some people comment on how difficult it is for them to find, to make those connections with traditional owners.
And it is because I don't know all of what it looks like where you're from, whether your council can connect you. So if your school is serious, this is not on you. This is not on you as the teacher. Reconciliation is going to be involving staff from your school. So if your first step is where you're having difficulty, start a reconciliation group, which should be involved, and I'm sure Julie would agree, it should involve your leaders, your principal and director, your heads of schools. It should involve your leaders. Once this is, you have these connections, you are then able to start building the relationship individually. So let me reiterate, it is not on you as a teacher to go out and make the connection. It should be part of your reconciliation committee's action. It has to be on there. Julie?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, Phyllis. So when you develop a reconciliation action plan, one of the first things that you do is to develop a RAP working group. And the purpose of that group is so that, as Phyllis said, it's not the responsibility of one passionate teacher to do this work. It's sustainable, and it's kind of done together as a group. And one of the actions that you commit to when you develop a reconciliation action plan is to build relationships with community, because we can't do the work of reconciliation without having those relationships with community. And the thing about relationships is it's very much about us as non-Indigenous teachers and educators going out to learn more about community. It's about building kind of transformational relationships with people, rather than just going to people and asking them for things. So a RAP kind of can support you to do that with your RAP working group, just as Phyllis said. But I guess another couple of things to keep in mind, Linda can always help you, especially for those of you in this room, to connect with kind of land councils, some smaller reconciliation groups that might be able to connect you in at more local places. But just keep in mind, if you reflect upon Australia's true history and colonial violence, and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people's historical exclusion from the education system, and the violence that's been perpetuated through education as an institution, we need to be really careful about the way that we approach community, and we need to understand and have a high level of respect, and have done some self-reflection before we're ready to even go out into community to build those connections. And I'm sure you all, the fact that you're here is a great sign that you're probably already undergoing some of that reflective practice. But yes, there's definitely resources throughout the RAP process to support you with this kind of work.
The Narragansett platform is certainly for us, and so that I wasn't it wasn't me just driving it, has been invaluable. The resources are fantastic. It breaks it down. You know, what is it? You know, creating a stakeholder list, for example. What is it? How can you develop it? Where are the resources? So so much work has gone into Narragansett, and it has become invaluable into our approach. It has also helped me, as the only First Nation employee of West Moreton Anglican College, direct my colleagues to help educate them, because it's not all on me and shouldn't be. And that's why we have these amazing platforms for as First Nation people to direct others too, because this is our goal. Our goal is, you know, reconciliation. Anything else?
I don't see any more questions in the chat, and I hope that there's nobody with their hand up. Can't see anyone. No, because I've had you on speaker view so that our recording looks nicer with your lovely face in it. I'm just amazed that we've kept all of the people, most of the people that we've had for the last hour and a half, continue right through to the end. We did have a difficulty in that for some reason, our Zoom cut off at 100, even though we've got a paid account. And so there were some people who missed out on the session, but we will make the recording available to them. They've been informed to send me an email if they missed out. And for those of you who want to find out, you know, a little bit more deeply, listen to this session again, or offer it to your colleagues, please just send me an email and I'll make that available to you.
Linda, can I just jump in? There was a question that I saw come in from the chat about art symbols.
Oh, yeah.
And can they use it or replicate it? So as teachers, you can certainly show the symbols and teach about it. You cannot replicate them. So these symbols that First Nation people use were a way of communicating, either through messages, through stories. They're part of the language. So again, and I mean, I would happily have any of my First Nation colleagues on who are still here with us contribute to this question, but the way I'm leading the First Nation, here at West Moreton Anglican College, is that we are not here to replicate we're here to learn about those symbols and how they were used. And if I then take them out into country where we're going for a walk, it is getting them to then think about symbols that they would use or could design for their own use within the classrooms, if that makes sense. And this is, you know, if we have any First Nations colleagues who would like to contribute to that, please do so, because that's just my approach. You may have within your community, and I'm specifically speaking to the First Nation colleagues here, where your community have said that it's okay. But I know my community have not said that it's okay.
I'm sorry. I'm just typing back a message. Please send me in. People who are on the chat are saying that they want a copy of the recording, probably to gather more of the detail of what you said, because there's a lot in what you transferred to us today.
And that was only two. Don't forget, there's still two others that I didn't get to.
Oh, well, I'm sure we'll have you back again to talk about those.
Okay, yeah. No, that wasn't me trying to say that, but yeah, okay.
Oh, I think that'd be wonderful and be very well received, as today has been. Like I said, we couldn't fit everybody in. There was over 100 people who wanted to participate. So thank you so much. We have run into time now. We're about a minute off. So if there's anything that more that you want to finish up on, Phyllis, please make any comments you want to at this point in time before we finish.
I think, you know, as what we are doing now that we are having these conversations and asking the questions and, you know, having our First Nation voice being accounted for. I mean, we still have a long way to go. But what we're looking for is not just about being included at the table, but ensuring our voice is listened to when we're at the table. You know, that's inclusion. And, you know, from my point of view, you know, I've only been working in a school for 4 years. I have had the distinct privilege of working with colleagues who are holding to their integrity and being authentic in their approach when they say to me, we want to get this right. And so if you are starting this journey, remember, it should not be just on you. You should have colleagues that are prepared to walk with you on this journey, and certainly should be led by the leaders within your school. I've had people say to me, First Nation education should, an employee should be, you know, on the executive team. If I get too much into policies and managing people, I'm going to lose that access to what I enjoy. And as teachers, which is, we love working with the students. We love seeing that, you know, that fills me. Yeah, I came back yesterday to my desk so excited working with the year 4s. And tomorrow I'm working with the year 8. So, you know, I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose that, because that's what fills the cup. And it's, you know, when we talk about well-being, you got to know your well-being and what that provides. So I'm very privileged, and I know what that means. And the other thing is, you know, if you have a First Nations person, you know, just because they're a teacher, and if they want to champion that, that's great. But it might be that your school needs a cultural educator, somebody who fills those gaps, because the teacher, they have the role of working with a specific group of children, and that, you know, from my understanding of my teachers colleagues, that's not just a 8 to 3 job. There's many hours put into it afterwards.
Most definitely. If you're passionate about the work that you do, then it doesn't seem like work, and there's no end to the day.
No.
We know that in reconciliation, don't we, Julie? And teachers know that very well, teachers and educators. So look, you've certainly filled our cup today. It's to the brim and overfilling with ideas and knowledge, and I can't thank you enough for coming and sharing with us today, Phyllis.
Just rise, everybody, rise.
Yes, indeed. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Humbly.